Hello, 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 it's Knits for Sanity, and welcome back to my third in my series on mitered squares. If you have not yet seen the first two videos, I strongly encourage you to go back and start with those videos first, especially as it is critical to understand the concepts in those two videos before we address what we do today. But as a quick recap, in the first video, we discussed how to actually create a mitered square. I demonstrated two methods to do so. One was with a knit 3 decrease in the center, and the other was with a knit 2 together 2 times as a center decrease. So that was video 1. In video 2, we discussed how we seamlessly join mitered squares horizontally. So going in a row this way. And if you have not watched this video, I strongly encourage you to go back and watch this video, because knowing this information is going to help you know how then we go vertically. So this week we will be discussing how we move vertically up a row. And to do this, we will actually be picking up stitches along our first triangle, and then continuing to make our mitered square as normal. Now, as you can see, I used a spare piece of yarn to tie off what is actually my final 2 stitches on this square, because if you'll recall from our last video, I can then knit these 2 stitches together with my new yarn and pick up stitches along this end to create my next square moving up vertically. So I have left that alone for now to both show you as well as giving me the option to go up one more square in my sample piece to further display the finished item of what we are going for here. Actually, I mean, I'm not trying to create anything with this. This is all just for demonstration purposes, but I'm debating about trying to keep it even and do a 3x3 project. I don't know though, it's not really necessary, but I did want to show you this and also point out that even if you don't have like anything fancy to hold stitches, a piece of scrap yarn will always work just fine. And what I did with this, I strung it through my 2 remaining stitches, leaving a long enough tail so I should not have to worry about these stitches pulling out. And then I just gently tied them together with a very simple, just a crisscross, like the first step of tying your shoes. So this is very easy for me to then undo, slide my needles back in there, and commence knitting. Okay, so first thing that we need to do is determine where we're going to build up from. In my case, I'm using my pink and going up from there, but there is no reason, say what I did here, but there is no reason why I could not have actually just turned this around and gone up this way. I do recommend working from the same side always. So, like here, I'm going right to left, and I'm starting with that same square and going up. It is not strictly necessary, but it will help you with visualizing what you're doing. And that will make more sense as we continue. So to do that, because I don't have an available starting point already, like I do when I join them this way, these 2 were joined together by knitting the last 2 stitches of my light pink square using my dark pink yarn, and then that was my first stitch of my new square. So in order to do this, I need to pick up stitches right from the beginning. And again, plot this out a little bit ahead of time. I'll pick up 1 here, and I always go under both stitches because it gives you a much more secure join. So that would be stitch 1, and you can kind of see it, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and then it gets a little tricky here, but we do have 14 and 15. So look at it ahead of time and visualize where you will be picking up those stitches. Then take your new yarn and leaving a slightly longer tail than normal, just because with pulling on the yarn, this tail will probably become a little bit shorter, and you want to make sure you have enough left on the end. You will have the right side facing up, always right side up. You will reach from the front of your work to the back, and again, I always pick up both of those stitches, and I will show this several times. This is very important. It creates a stronger and more equal join. Wrap your yarn around. The first stitch is the hardest. I hold on to my tail, usually with my other hand. Pull it through. This is now my first stitch of my next square. Then I move on to my next point, which is right here. And again, it's picking up both stitches. It's not just going through one half of a stitch, it's picking up the full stitch. Wrapping it around, pulling out my new yarn, my new stitch. Here again, do you see that it is the full stitch here? It's not both stitches. I was really misspeaking. It is one stitch, but I'm picking up the full thing. So it's both legs of that stitch. Putting it on my needle, sliding it through, picking it up, sliding it through, picking it up. It is different feeling picking up all of your stitches versus working from one stitch that you already have on your needle, but it is not actually any different. And again, when you get about halfway, pause, count how many stitches you have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So yes, I am just about halfway. And then look ahead. Do I have room for 7 more stitches? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is in there, and 7. The second to last stitch will be difficult, and that's just because of when you create your mitered square, you will have a knit 2 together or knit 3 together that you're contending with for that second to last stitch. But I will show you how to find that stitch back. So we just keep going. All right, now we are on that second to last stitch. When you get there, I feel like it is a little bit easier to see what it is that you need to grab. It's right here. You're kind of working underneath the knot. Okay, it's not actually a knot. Like I said, it's just created because of the decreasing that you're doing. But your needle will go underneath that. Under here, pick up your next stitch. And then finally your very last stitch, you pick that one up. Okay. Now, the advantage too with picking up both legs of every stitch is things like that kind of unsightly decrease that you will have at the end of every mitered square will now be hidden from the front side. You put the whole thing on the back side of the work now. All right, double check your count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And now it's just a matter of knitting a mitered square like normal. Make sure you knit every square the same. For me, I have been using a knit 2 together 2 times as my decrease in this project. If you are doing a knit 3 together as your center decrease, I say you now continue like normal, forgetting that we need to go through casting on our remaining stitches. I meant like we did with like normal with this video when we put on this dark pink square. I'm sorry, maybe I haven't had enough coffee today. But if you are knitting a center of knit 3 together decrease, you will need to cast on 16 additional stitches. If you're doing like me with a knit 2 together 2 times center decrease, we will cast on 15 more stitches, because if you recall, my squares all start with 30 stitches. You cannot really, you could, but it would give you slightly uneven squares if you try and change the method of mitered square creation halfway through your project. So be consistent. That's the biggest thing with knitting, is be consistent. If you make a mistake, it's not going to be noticeable if it's the same consistent mistake. But ideally, we don't want to be making a ton of mistakes either. But just, yes, be consistent. If you always pick up your stitches the same way, it will look nice. So, having said that, we're going to use the same method to cast on our remaining 15 stitches, which is the backward loop method. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. All right. I now have 30 stitches on my needle. And if you have watched the last video, you now know that we are going to work this as a normal seamless added square to our project, which means wrong side rows are always knit back rows. How do we know it's a wrong side row? Very easy now, because it looks like the wrong side of your fabric. So every time you're on a wrong side row, that will be a knit back row. Because this is my first row, I will place my stitch marker after the first 15 stitches. If you did the triple, the 3-stitch knit together decrease, you will have to put your stitch marker after 16 stitches. But regardless, both times you would have your stitch marker placed in between the stitches you picked up and the stitches you cast on. You could possibly have picked up 16 stitches on your original square, and I talk about that in my last video, but your cleanest approach will be to always pick up 15 stitches, or whatever the half number is minus the 1 extra stitch on your mitered square. So I will zip through here and knit down to where I place my stitch marker. If you recall too, I do talk about how knitting that first row after increasing your stitches, casting on more stitches, is a little bit fiddly. Just take it slow and you will get through it. Just slow. If you are newer to knitting and doing this, I strongly recommend using wood needles. Bamboo needles in particular are especially sticky, which will really prevent your stitches from sliding off from your needle. So wood typically is a stickier material, but bamboo in particular will help you with not losing your stitches, which comes in really handy in a situation like this where it's kind of finicky with getting through that stitch and knitting it for the first time. We are almost there. See, look, I'm even having trouble with this one. If you just heard my dog bark in the background, he does that. Huh, there, look, see? It can be really persnickety that even sometimes I get hung up on a stitch. All right, now I'm going to place my stitch marker. Knit the rest of them. Knitting your picked up stitches also can be definitely different and slightly more tricky than knitting stitches that are already existing on your needle, but generally is much easier than knitting your your cast on stitches. All right, pull my tail a little tight, turn my work over, and as you can see, we've already started. Here we go. From here on out, I will knit my mitered square as I have all of my other mitered squares. You know how to do that now, and so I'm just going to speed this up. Before I begin, I will point out that if you notice here, it looks like this green square is really pulling on this stitch, and you may be concerned about it not looking good, looking like it's going to be too far to the right, not sitting quite right on top of the pink square. Do not worry about this. We are going to cover this in our next video. So I just want to say that now. You may be tempted to try and pick up an extra stitch here where on the other side of the light pink and the dark pink yarns meet up, but I'm going to tell you don't do that. Just trust me. All right, now we will speed this up, and I will see you after I fly through this. And here we are on my last 4 stitches. I knit 2 together, remove my stitch marker, knit my last 2 together, and I'm left with 2 stitches left on my needle. If I desire to keep going in this direction, I can leave these 2 stitches on my needle by either using some kind of a holder or just getting some yarn. If you are uncomfortable with just threading yarn through the stitches like this, go ahead and use a needle to pull them through. Then I make a loose join, pull it a little tight, and presto. Now we have, oh, I have to cut this. Again, leaving a tail long enough so that if you want to come back later and just finish off these 2 stitches, knit them together, and then knot out that last stitch, you can do that. But this is what we have done thus far, is now you know how to join squares seamlessly. You know how to add on more squares to go in another direction. The other advantage to this is, let's say you realize, hey, wait, I want to go further this way. You now know how to pick up stitches to be able to do that. Same, if you bind off sooner than what you had intended here, you can just pick up more stitches. Or if you prefer to not use your new color yarn to knit your last 2 or 3 stitches together to make that your first stitch for your next square, you never have to do that. You can always just pick up your stitches. I know some questions may be developing right now, including, how do we put a square here? Next week, that is precisely what we will cover, is how do we put a square here? If you have found these videos to be helpful, it would mean a lot to me if you would help support my channel. You can look at my notes below, which if you are on a smartphone, there is usually a little like down arrow triangle to click on that to read through all of my notes for this episode. And that will include ways that you can support my channel. But basically, liking, subscribing, sharing my videos, buying me a coffee are all ways to support my channel and help ensure that I'm able to continue doing these tutorials. For us small-time subscribers, this is truly a labor of love. There is no monetary compensation involved. There is just the gratification and satisfaction, hoping that I am helping fellow crafters. Stay tuned. Like I said, next week we will complete this little example and put our square here. Otherwise, until then, be kind to everyone around you. I hope you're having a great day, and I will see you again really soon.